Hi everyone, we want to welcome you to today's webinar. The special needs team and the mental health team have paired together to put a webinar to focus on the transition back to school in a global pandemic. This has been a very big topic lately, so we really wanted to offer some support and some awareness during this time. My name's Santina and I am the Youth PSI here at the Trenton MFRC, and this is my coworker Brittany Jones, and she is the program intake worker at the Trenton MFRC.
So today, for our agenda, some of the things we're going to touch on. So first, we're just going to start with some tips to ease the transition for back to school. And then we're going to move into some things to help with preparing for the unknown. We're going to touch briefly on some of the messages we've received from the Ministry of Education and some of the local school boards. We're going to go through kind of what back to school will look like, some tips for motivating your child to go back to school. We're going to focus a lot on creating positive dialogue in your family, as well as managing the big transition, breaking down by age. And then at the end, we're going to touch on some tools to help kind of implement all these things that we're discussing today.
So I just wanted to take a moment and talk about the impact that this has had on our families. So this picture here is actually taken from the Government of Canada website. And the reason I really wanted to share this with you all is because I find it very validating. Just taking a look of some of the stats that are on here, 74% of families were very or extremely concerned about balancing childcare, schooling, and their own personal work all at once. There's also a stat on here that talks about 61% experienced major concerns managing their children's behavior, emotions, and anxiety. This is a very challenging time as parents, and we're kind of in this ebb and flow of a lot of change. We really are doing the best we can with what we have in those moments. So I really just wanted to take a moment and share this with you so you can see how other families are probably feeling the same way you are during this time. And remember, you're not alone. So I also wanted to take a moment to talk about normalizing some feelings. So with that being said, a lot of what we're seeing from children, ourselves, and other people are really normal responses to the global pandemic. So this can include health anxiety, social anxiety, moments of panic, and feeling very overwhelmed at times. And again, this is all normal. At times, people are feeling unmotivated as well. Sometimes we are open to support and sometimes we are not, because sometimes we just need to be validated for what we're feeling in that moment, and that's okay. So a huge piece for this is why I wanted to share it is because, again, we want to validate what you are all feeling. So I took both of these pictures from one, the Andrea Warnock Consulting, and it's on her Facebook page. And again, that's just the one talking about normalizing feelings during this time. And the other picture is an emotion chart. So sometimes children have a hard time stating what they were feeling and coming up with how to label those emotions. So this chart is just something that you can use with your kids to help them to label what they're feeling. I had taken this from the Trauma & Co. Facebook page. I encourage you all to go look at both of their pages. It's really great. And again, we really are doing the best we can with what we have available to us. We have a big transition coming up of going back to school, and this is very common that this is going to bring up a lot of different feelings and a lot of different emotions for different people.
So as we think about back to school, we just wanted to give you some tips for easing that transition. And again, get you in that mindset of back to school. It's been a long time since we've been in school due to COVID. So we just want to kind of touch on some of those tips. And many of these tips will help no matter what you've chosen for your family in terms of back to school. So the first one I want to touch on is reestablishing routines. So with summertime, as always, some of those routines kind of slide as we go on vacation and enjoy kind of the unstructured time. It's really important that we take time to slowly ease back into these routines. I want you to think about things like mealtime routines, bedtime, and morning routines especially. That way, once school does start, we're not dealing with so much resistance from our children. So take the next few weeks to slowly introduce those things again, so that we can get our kids slowly used to them and not kind of jump in head first. The next one that I would suggest is something like meal planning, especially for those first few weeks. It's going to be really uncomfortable to be the time pressure that we haven't had to deal with so much lately. So take the time to plan it out so you know what you're going to be making, even make some things ahead of time. It'll help that in the moment you're not stressed about preparing meals, and you can focus on your kids and what they're feeling, and helping them through those moments. The next one is a countdown. Countdowns can be really helpful to build some excitement with your kids. So back to school can be a really exciting time. We just have to frame it that way. So if we put it on the calendar and we count it down like it's something really cool to look forward to, we can create that in our kids and help them also prepare for that time. Give them time to reflect on, this is something upcoming, and be able to give them that time to bring up any concerns they have, because they know when it's coming. The next is to prepare something like a launch pad. This could be a cubby, it could be, the closet by your front door, it could be a little table, somewhere where your child can keep their backpack and their lunch pail and their water bottle, have a checklist for their routine, something like that. It really helps your child from forgetting things every day. It also helps to build things like organization, independence, and responsibility. The next one is really important, so talk it out. Talk about what to expect, answer their questions, validate their feelings, like Santina said, validate their fears and worries, those are normal, and help them problem solve any concerns. So by doing that, we build some confidence around the transition that's coming. The next is to nurture independence. So this one might slow you down at first, but in the long run, it's gonna help you out. So find some key things, age-appropriate things out of your routine that your child can complete independently. This might be as simple as getting dressed or packing their bag, and have them start doing those things. Like I said, it's going to slow you down at the beginning, but in the long run, it will help ease your load, as well as, again, building some of that responsibility and independence for your children. The next is to use visuals. So visuals can be really helpful to help your kids understand what's going on and to reinforce those desired behaviors. So using things like visual calendars or social stories can be really helpful to reinforce those messages that we're trying to get them to receive. And last but not least is to do a practice run. You can do as many as you want. Sometimes it takes, a whole week of practicing it over and over for you to work out all the kinks, but again, take the time that you need to work out those things before the time pressure is on, and you'll see that when that time pressure is on, you'll have reduced behaviors around those routine pieces.
I think today in our presentation, you will really notice that Brittany and I really focus on doing those practice runs and practicing different skills, because again, when you're in that safe and controlled environment, the more you practice, the more you're going to feel confident and comfortable doing it when it actually comes time to do it.
Absolutely. So I wanted to move into preparing for the unknown. We know that this school year comes with a lot of uncertainty, and this can be stressful for everyone, yourself and your children included. So we've outlined some things that can be helpful in these kind of unknown times to support your kids through it and yourself as well. So the first one is probably the most important, is know your limits. So you can't do everything, and that's okay. Know where your limits are, and really prioritize taking care of yourself. It needs to come first so that we can show our kids how to do that. We need to be careful to not have high expectations during this time. So giving some grace for things like your homework not being done, those things can come in time. We want to make sure that they have the support needed to work through that time. The next one is that it's okay not to know, and to be honest about that. So letting your kids know that you don't have all the answers is okay. Your job is to validate any feelings that brings up for your child, and to let them know that you're there to support them no matter what happens. We want to also model some good coping behaviors. So the best thing we can do is to model that calm and honest and caring approach to things, and to not overreact to bumps in the road, and to normalize those fears and worries. So let them know that having fears and worries is normal, and we have them too, and this is how we work through them. Give them the skills to do that. And along that same line, be honest. So acknowledge that there's risks, and challenges, and highlight the precautions and the things you're going to do to work around those challenges or work through those challenges. And just remember that sometimes using blanket statements like everything is going to be okay can invalidate your child's feelings and cause more anxiety. So letting them know the truth and helping them work through the skills to be able to cope with that is going to help relieve the anxiety more than those blanket statements will.
So continuing on with all those great tips that Brittany just had stated, we wanted to add a few more. So an important aspect to this is finding something to look forward to. This is something that I really encourage families to do. I encourage myself to do. This is something that I use for myself all the time, especially during a time of change and a time of stress. And if I know that I'm going to be feeling overwhelmed, I really kind of plan something so that I can look forward to for myself. And I find that this is going to really help your children and yourselves notice that, this current situation won't last forever. This is something that we've dealt with before, although it was a little bit different, but this is kind of a way to help build that resiliency and encourage them to look for positives, even in those challenging situations, because as we stated, it's not going to last forever, and you will make it through this change just like you did before. Another piece to this is reinforcing the coping ability. So help give your children the strategies that they need to cope and give them space to let them do so. Keep lines of communication open and always do constant check-ins. I think that's a really important piece during this, is having that time for communication and utilizing those times to do those check-ins. This is a great way to look back and see how you've dealt with transitions in the past. What's helped? Use those again. Another important point that I really want to kind of use as a take-home message too to this is your kid's job is to be a kid. So your job is to help them to work through current situations, help them to find, again, that positive coping reactions, and regardless of what is to come, work with the information and what you have in the present moment and let your kids be the kids. And along with that is, again, like we said, what's worked before, use more of it, because that's what's going to really help them. So we just wanted to take a moment and talk about stress tolerance. So when it comes to stress tolerance, we have this window, and it's about how much we can handle, and at times that it can be too much. So for every person, this is very individual, and it's something that is very personal for every person, and everyone's going to have a different level of tolerance. So with that being said, at this point, we have been dealing with this since March. And also prolonged periods of stress can often make your windows much smaller. So at these times, you may notice more behaviors with your kids, or even yourselves. You may notice your patience decreasing, your empathy is more challenging. And at times it may be common for you to feel like you're really stuck in that fight, flight, or freeze mode, as that is a normal reaction to stress. So again, just being aware of that and acknowledging that, especially during this time, that stress tolerance in that window may decrease. And it's a good time to kind of sit back and reflect and say, what's going on? What's the bigger picture? What can I do to help? And kind of just take that time for reflection and see what's going on in every environment in your children's life.
So I just wanted to take a moment to reflect on some of the messages that we've received about what school will be, and the guidelines from the Ministry of Education and some of the local school boards. This has been out for a while now. I'm not going to go too much into it, because what we've seen is that every school board, every school is approaching this very differently. So I'd encourage you to contact your school board as it relates to your family, and how to plan for that, because things are changing quickly. And again, that kind of goes along with that whole idea that things are so uncertain right now. So just be aware that things are changing kind of fluidly, and keep in contact with your school. The one thing I did want to identify as something to be aware of: as parents, we do have the choice whether to send our children to school in person or to continue with distance learning. I do want to highlight the fact that if you decide to do distance learning and partway through semester you decide it's not working anymore and you would like to send your child to school, there are limitations to that now because of the cohorting that's happening. So just be aware that many of the local school boards are only considering reentry monthly, if that. And so just be aware that even when they're reconsidering, it's not guaranteed. So just be aware that you have plans in place to be able to continue throughout the entire semester. And I know that's a lot of pressure, but just wanted to kind of flag that because it's not necessarily something that's been focused on in the media, just so you have all the information when you're choosing what's best for your family.
And I think just going off of that too, our biggest kind of take home message from this too is, again, every school board is so different. So making sure you are engaging with the school board, with the principals and with the teachers, that's kind of the best message that we have overall for this. So another piece that we wanted to touch on is, what will school actually look like? So first of all, I have had a lot of conversations with parents about sending kids back to school, about doing the homeschooling, and wondering, you know, how much should the kids be involved in this conversation? So a huge piece to this is that this really is a parent decision. So whether or not you decide to go back to school full time or to homeschool, that is up to the parent to decide. Some decisions are just too big for kids, and I really truly believe that this is one of those decisions that is for the parents. Of course, I absolutely recommend you talking to your kids, seeing how they feel, seeing what some of their concerns are. But again, like to my point before, their job is to be a kid, and this is a parent decision. Once you make a decision, and again, it's going to be different and personal for every family because every family has different needs, different values, and different circumstances. So once you've made a decision that best reflects your family, be positive about it and be confident. Your kids are really going to be looking to see how your reactions are to this change to help kind of define how they feel about it. So be positive, be confident, and you'll see that reflected in your children's behavior too. So when going back to school, talk to your kids about what they might see, what they might feel, what they might hear. Really play into those senses because, again, there are going to be some changes, and really that preparation is going to be huge. Talk about what's different and talk about what's the same. Maybe this is how recess will be a little bit different for them, or how the classrooms will be, or what being on a bus is like. Again, also talk about those things that are similar and the same so that they have a sense of normalcy, a sense of safety, and something kind of positive in there too. And another huge piece to this is explore the misconceptions. So this is huge, especially for that school age group. They're going to have a lot of misconceptions. So I always encourage you, like I said before, to have those conversations with the kids to see what they think, to see how they're feeling, to clear up those misconceptions that may be there. So for example, they may have misconceptions about why they need to wear a mask or about staying home when they're sick. There's so many different things, and conversations can be had in a very positive way. So for example, when talking about hand washing or mask wearing, you can talk about, you know, how this is something that, especially with hand washing, this is something that we did before, should have done more of, and can continue on doing going forward. So again, you can have these conversations in a positive light. And again, clearing up those misconceptions is going to be key. So again, just to kind of that take home message from this, preparation is key. And a huge piece is that we haven't done this before. So that follow-up piece is going to be important too, because that's when we can go back and say, you know what, you're right. We didn't think about this. So let's think about this going forward and decide what we can do moving forward. So another piece that we wanted to briefly touch on is talking about motivation. So motivation is the reason why we take part in a certain behavior, certain activity. And it has been a long time since kids have been in the classroom. And now that they're going back, they're having a lot of different guidelines, which at times is going to be very overwhelming for them. Some kids that I've talked to are very excited to return and see their friends. Some kids, on the other hand, aren't so excited. So again, this is that kind of time for change, and motivation is so personal to everyone. So there's going to be different internal and external reasons for motivation during this time. So I had previously done a webinar where I had touched on motivation as well. And a huge piece is that there's the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So you may need to play into those depending on the situation. So when it comes to that kind of internal piece, we do things for meaning, for mastery, for a sense of belonging, for curiosity. So those are really important things to remember as your children are going back to school. Another piece is that kind of more external reason for motivation. And as kids are kind of getting back into that homework and going to school, we may have to tap into this a little bit more and coming up with, helping them to find reasons to do the activities again, such as homework. So a lot of the times this can be because they get that gold star, because they get that reward. So again, taking kind of a moment and recognizing, what's influencing their motivation, what's maybe discouraging it, what can we kind of do to change the situation? And again, as I said before, we all have different reasons for our motivation.
So to just kind of go off of that, I've just put together some tips to help if you find your child struggling with wanting to go back to school, that motivation to go back to school. Here's some ideas of things that you can do to help that. So the first one is to talk about what they're excited about and what they're not excited about, and problem solve around the things they're not excited about. Again, kind of trying to create that positive narrative for what school is and why we go there. Kind of going off that, trying to recall high points from previous years and looking at those things as potentially things to look forward to this year. And I know this school year might be a little bit different, so it might take some kind of investigating to find those things that you'll be able to take from previous years into this year. But again, focusing on, you've had these high points from last year. What are those things going to look like this year? Give your child a challenge or create a game to get them excited about school. Focus on socialization. This one is big for a lot of kids. Friends are a huge motivator. So focus on those pieces and how that's going to look like for school this year to encourage them to be excited. Spark curiosity. So find out what your kids might be learning this year in their grade and try and create activities at home leading up to school that might spark some curiosity or interest that get them excited to go to school and learn about those things. And finally, you can use reinforcement for those parts of school that are particularly challenging for your child. So again, using those gold stars, reward charts, things of those nature that really encourage your child to partake in those things that are really challenging for them. And those things will look differently for every child.
So something that I wanted to briefly touch on is talking about how to create a dialogue during this time and how to start thinking about what type of narrative we want to express and kind of create during this time. A narrative is something, again, just like motivation, it's so personal to everyone. And I really think that we can help our children to pull some positives out of all of this and really develop some great life lessons. When it comes to kids and even ourselves, we often create our own narrative without kind of even fully talking about it all the time. So sometimes we don't even notice it. So I really want to encourage you to have these conversations as a family. So one way to begin doing this, kind of in that bigger picture, is to take a moment as parents, as adults, and ask ourselves, years from now, what do you want to be able to say about the year 2020? And what do you want your children to remember about it? Take some time to find your answers so that then you can come up with different ways of how to create those opportunities and have those conversations. Again, this is something that's going to be very different for every person. And again, maybe there's some things that you can pull from this webinar to take with this while you're creating your narrative. So again, whatever it is, you can create it. So more specifically, how do we create these conversations in kind of that bigger picture? So here we have included some conversation starters that you can use as your family and kind of do an overall check during this time. Especially, this is really good for any type of life transition as well. So a huge piece is that this offers a way to reflect overall during this time. And then more specifically, there's a lot that can be learned from this and also carried over to other life situations when it comes to changes. This is also a great way to show and model resiliency for your kids. So some of the questions that we included is, what is different and what is the same during this time? Again, this is something that you can reflect and look at, and it acknowledges and validates some changes and concerns, but it also talks about what's still the same and how we can move forward with that. Another question is talking about what has helped in the past when there is a change and what didn't help. So again, using more of what did help, and if things didn't help last time, that's okay. That's how we learn. So coming up with those skills and knowing kind of what we can continue to use in any life transition or change. Another question is, what was hard about this time and what was something that was good from it? Again, this helps to validate everyone's feelings, especially your children's feelings, and also kind of looking to see what good came out of this as well. And again, these are all things that you can kind of carry forward in any sort of change.
And you'll find that kids are really good at pulling out that good stuff when given the opportunity. We just need to model to them that this is something that's okay to do. It's okay to acknowledge that there's good and bad out of every situation. And often as parents, we get wrapped up in the stress and the negativity of the situation because things are hard, and don't give our kids the opportunity to find the good.
So during this time, we wanted to kind of help you to create some conversation starters that you can do around the table as check-ins during this time, as it is another period of a change. So again, asking your kids, what was hard this week and what was successful this week? Again, just like Brittany said, focusing on the good and the not so good, doing more of what is good and trying to problem solve to figure out what kind of maybe has been missed or what needs to be focused on, because again, we've never dealt with this type of specific change before, but this is a good way to reflect and make adjustments along the way as they come up. Another question is kind of focusing for parents and adults is, how do I want to model my own emotions and coping? So this is something that we have touched on briefly before, but a huge piece is that your kids are going to be looking to see how you're reacting to situations. If you're confident, your sense of security, they're really going to be looking to see how you react, and they're going to follow that and they're going to model it. So that's kind of a piece of just something that we can all reflect on as this time goes forward. So another thing that we wanted to just touch on is ages and stages. This is a topic I could probably go on forever about and do its own lecture. But again, depending on the age of your child, they may experience different reactions and different kind of specifics in regards to changes and life transitions. So for younger kids, you may notice a sense of separation anxiety. A lot of kids have been home with their parents pretty frequently. So again, modeling how to manage the emotions is going to be really important, and helping them to feel secure and feel safe. And a huge piece with younger kids is helping them to actually label their feelings. And again, those younger age groups, communicate with those teachers. That's going to be successful right now. For school age kids, I had mentioned this before, a huge piece for school age kids is that misconceptions. And it's going to be very common that they have misconceptions, even if they don't say it always to you, they've kind of got different conceptions going on in their own head. It is very common for them to have a sense of fear of the health of themselves and their parents. So again, it is common that you may notice that your kids are going to be worried, you know, if mom and dad go back to work and if I go to school, I may get them sick, or they may get sick from being at work. Those are going to be common concerns. So just acknowledging and validating how they're feeling and keeping in really good communication with the teachers and principals. When it comes to high school kids, independence and socialization is kind of their importance and what they're reflective of almost. So help them to come up with a routine that will work well for them. So a huge piece is that independence. So foster independence wherever you can. And they're going to be more likely to follow a routine if they have some sort of say in certain areas. And again, so include them in decisions when possible and offer choices when possible. So when it comes to children with special needs, routine is going to be key. I think we've talked a lot about before too, of practicing these new routines, getting in that consistency again, and I think that's going to be something that is really important. Behaviors are a sign of stress, and that is said for any child. And for children with special needs, focus on the senses and explain and prep whenever possible.
So we wanted to kind of give you a couple tools to think about in terms of implementing some of the tips that we've given you. And the first one is a visual calendar. Visual calendars can be used in many different ways and to help with pretty much any transition. They're used a lot in schools. and it can help with reestablishing or creating new routines. So I just have a couple examples here on our presentation for you of how you could use a visual calendar. So the first one is a routine visual to help break down, to help your child learn or reestablish routines that have maybe slid away. The next is a weekly calendar, so helping your child understand when they're going to school and when they're not. I know many school boards are kind of different with how they're approaching that, so that may be useful to you. And then again, with so much uncertainty, you might choose to do distance learning, or that may become a reality again throughout the school year. So using a routine schedule to help identify what happens at each point of the day, and in the example I've given here is implement some choices to help your child have a sense of control, which can help with some of those anxiety pieces. The next tool here is a social story. So social stories can be really helpful in explaining and working through some social situations that your child may find difficult, or explaining some things that are new, in this case, mask wearing at school. So mask wearing at school, some of the things that you want to address in a social story like we have here is reasons why we wear a mask, how to wear one, normalizing some of the more difficult parts of wearing a mask, and helping children again see the positives out of it. This social story will be shared on our Facebook, so keep an eye out for that so that you can use it as you feel needed. But again, these are things to help our children practice these kind of important pieces and these important changes as we move into back to school.
So when it comes to the social story, and especially around mask wearing and hand washing, I have had quite a few conversations with kids, and one of their biggest concerns is wearing a mask to school and what that's going to feel like. So something that I've suggested to parents and kids is to start practicing doing that at home. So maybe that means while your children are, using their technology, or while they're playing a game, maybe this is when they practice wearing those masks, and helping them to kind of, you can start small and then increase their time length so that they're kind of getting used to it. Wearing a mask was something that I had to get used to too again. I've worn them before, and it was something that I had to start practicing on my own time again. So again, this is a new piece of clothing. We haven't always had to wear something on our face. It is warm at times, and we haven't had to wear this yet. So for kids, this may be new, and this may be something that they kind of have to get used to. So the best way is to practice it. And same with hand washing. This is something that we've kind of done before, but it's really encouraged even more so now. So practicing those routines at home, really looking to see how your kids are washing their hands. And again, going through it with them step by step to make sure, that they feel comfortable and confident doing it. A huge piece to this is the fact that, especially when it comes to mask wearing, again, like we said, this is something for kids to get used to again. So if they can do it in the comfort and safety of their own home and in a controlled environment, then if they do feel uncomfortable or need a break, they can take the mask off at home, because like I said, it is a safe and controlled environment. So again, a huge piece is helping kids kind of for that success when they go back to school, so that when they do start school, it's not as overwhelming and as new, because they've had the opportunity to practice doing it before school. So that is the end of our webinar today, and I really hope that you found something helpful during this. If you have any other concerns that come up or have any idea for follow-up webinars, absolutely reach out to us. We want to hear from you, and we want to know what you're experiencing and provide the support and help wherever we can. So for our support, you can email the mental health team, and the link is on this site here, and it's mentalhealth@trentonmfrc.ca. And if there's any school-specific related concerns, you can reach out to Brittany, and her email is brittany.j@trentonmfrc.ca. Best of luck, and we hope to hear from you soon.